Today I wish to talk to you about a life of prayer, and each of our scripture readings give us a hint as to what that life of prayer might look like. But before I get into that, I just want to give you some background information to the scriptures that were read for you today. The book of Hosea is written about the same time as Amos, and in fact, both prophets might have met each other along the way. What is happening in this context, as I've mentioned before, you have the northern kingdom of Israel, the southern kingdom called Judah. Judah has its religious capital and its political capital, Jerusalem, where in the northern part called Israel, Samaria is the capital and Bethel is the religious center. And both Hosea and Amos are very disturbed about what they see happening in their society, but you'll notice how their prophecies work. Amos looks at things that are happening around him, such as a plumb line or a ripe fruit that is starting to turn badly on the table. In the case of Hosea, he lives out his prophetic awareness through his life. So God says to him, go marry yourself a whore. And he does, because Israel is a whore to its people or to its God and has not been faithful. And according to the story of Hosea, he stubbornly remains faithful to this lady who can never be faithful to him, and her name is Gomer. And the children that she bears also have unique names. Jezreel is the first child that is born. Jezreel is in reference to where Armageddon, the great final battle, would happen in Revelation. It's also a huge plain that goes from the coastline up toward the mountain region. And that's mostly where most of the invasions would happen. So Jezreel is, in translation, God sows. And God is sowing trouble. The Assyrians are coming from the north, slowly invading into Israel, eventually making their way into Judah. And Hosea is very disturbed by what he sees happening in terms of the priestly class, the king themselves. And in fact, during that time, they went through 3 kings in 15 years. All of them were assassinated while in office. So the political stability isn't there. And further to it, as I mentioned to you before, both the king and the upper class were about 1% of the population. They would often lend loan to farmers who were trying to reap a harvest off the land. If they had a poor year, they were told to pay up or else. And what that meant was they would give up their farmland, and the upper class, or perhaps even the king, would outright take their land from them, confiscate it, and those farmers had nowhere to go. And the vast majority of the people living in Samaria and in larger communities were very poor, while you had this extreme rich class. And both Hosea and Amos are addressing this issue. They're asking them to return to a faithful basis, but they're not becoming faithful. So he marries a whore. Gomer gives birth to Jezreel. God sows the trouble that is coming. The next child is Lo Ruhamah, which simply means unpitied. And the next son, Lo Ami, means not my people. God is forsaking his people. God is upset. And Hosea, who tries to remain faithful to this woman who can't be faithful to him, is exhibiting the very nature of Israel's relationship with its God. And so he says judgment is coming. But he ends with a positive note, in which he says at one point both kingdoms will once be reunited under one ruler, and once again Israel will prosper, once it comes back to its senses. Now in Colossians we have something very different, a letter that's not written by Paul at all, even though it has said in its handwriting, I, Paul. We believe that this is probably one of his disciples or students. The language is far too elaborate, and it talks about a pre-existent Christ, something which Paul really doesn't mention in the letters that are attributed to him. This is a deeper theology. And one of the things that's being expressed in the passage for us today is that it is in the faith of Jesus that we find the pleroma, the fullness of God. God has manifested himself in the faith of Jesus. And it's in that faith that we are saved. Meaning practice the faith that Jesus practiced, we too will also be saved. There will be a cost to that type of discipleship. We will bear many burdens, but at the same time, the world will evolve and change gradually for the better because we have kept faith with God and God's greater plan for the world. And finally, the Gospel of Luke, stories you're very familiar with, but I just want to accentuate a few things. You have a shortened version of the Lord's Prayer in Luke, which is an earlier version of the Lord's Prayer from Matthew. Don't bother your head about that, just to say it's a different version. It's more simply written out for everyone to understand. And it has interesting consequences. God is consecrated as holy, and therefore God shall be honored by his name. He will provide us with food and the things that we need. We ask him not to lead us into temptation, meaning that we don't force the envelope of God's hand. And more importantly, that we live with the great hope that one day he will come back again. And then we have this interesting parallel of stories. The first one, a friend who has been awakened in the middle of the night by another friend, asking for 3 extra loaves of bread because he had unexpected guests. And so he's knocking on the door, and his friend says, "Don't bother me right now, I'm in bed. I have my children, they're in bed. I don't want to wake up the household and provide with bread. Come to me in the morning." But the guy keeps knocking. "I need bread. I have visitors. Please, out of great Middle Eastern hospitality, you owe it to me to give me some bread so I can serve my friends who have come at a most inopportune time." Prayer is persistence. Asking, 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 and never stop asking. And then the other story, very interesting story. Ask, it will be given. Seek, you will find. Knock, and the door will be open. Prayer can only be effective if you get involved in looking for your answers. It's not just waiting for God to respond. It's all about you searching for your own answers with God's help. All right, a life of prayer. My first point. I am a man of prayer. I know this for a fact. When I was a student minister practicing at Kirk United, Ray Leopard, who was the minister at that time, could not believe how I could lower my head and pray without a written set of words. And when I was done praying, he went up to the congregation and he says, "We have a man of prayer." I also remember my mother saying to me many, many times, "How, son, you pray when we ask you to pray." Whenever there was a family gathering, it was always up to me to say prayers. Whenever there was a special concern, I would do prayers. I remember being only this high in grade 1 when a dead bird we had to bury, and I was asked to conduct my first funeral. And I did the prayers. Now, I'm not saying I'm proud of that. I'm not trying to talk about my piety, but it's interesting how for me, prayer has never been a problem, as it has for so many other people. And as I looked at the Old Testament reading for today, it became very clear to me that I think I understand why that was always possible for me. You have to remain faithful to love and its ultimate source. Hosea is faithful to his wife even though she cheats on him, even though she runs away from him. God is still faithful to his people even though he's very disappointed. Eventually, at some point, the 2 kingdoms will reunite under one monarch, and they will know peace for a long time. So Hosea says, you have to remain faithful to love. You have to be able to understand its source. Where did I get this? A long time ago when my mother read me a book about being adopted and how she said my mother had to give me up for whatever reasons. And I can remember distrusting the story at that age. But my mother said, "Isn't it so nice because I have you?" And she put her arm around me and kissed me. I've always known I've been loved. I've always known that there And even though I've been disappointed by other people, including my parents, and even though I've been let down many times, I have never thought that love would be very far away. I never felt that I would ultimately be abandoned and left alone to my own resources. I always knew that there was something that would always be with me. And I call it God. No matter what happens, no matter how frustrating the world becomes, you can't give up on the source of your ultimate love. Let me give you another case in point very quickly. I was watching a program last night on the National Geographic during the storm that we had last night. And it was talking about global warming. And they were showing statistics. They were verifying the evidence. They were talking about extreme weather conditions and patterns which are going to continue as time goes on. And the program concludes by saying, if we don't do something about our carbon footprint, it's only going to get worse. And in fact, it may already be too late. When I saw it, my heart turned sad. And I thought, what will my future be like in another 20 years from now when it gets too hot to bear? Or when there's too much rain flooding my basement? What am I going to do when the snow is so cold and it's up to here and it's minus 50? And then all of a sudden it melts with this warm breeze that inhabits with no moisture to come for 2 months or more. How am I going to survive? What's going to happen to my wife and I? And at that point I began to panic just a little bit. I became very frustrated by our politicians and our policy decisions that we're making. And yet I'm thinking, what can we do? When suddenly I looked out of my backyard and I saw the flowers. And I saw the trees we planted. I looked at my grass and thought, it's coming along nicely. And all of a sudden, it dawned on me that there will always be bad news. But you have to look for the good. This is a beautiful world. This area is beautiful in the summertime. The lakes, the rivers, the trees, watching the birds. It's a beautiful planet. It's a wonderful world. And I realized that somehow I'll get by. How do I know that? Because I really do believe that God is in our life. And I know that if we respond, maybe perhaps we can slow the effects down. Perhaps maybe things will get better. But it will take a lot before we wake up and realize our responsibility as a society. And that terrifies me. And I'm frustrated. But I'm happy to be alive. I'm happy to know the beauty of the world whenever I see it. I drove by a bunch of geese the other day along Jesse Lake, eating the grass. Slowed the car down, watched them gobble the grass. It's things like that that give you faith. And that kind of faith makes you realize that love and life are alive. And if you hold on to that and never give in to the despair that the world would give you, your prayer life is much richer. Number 2, remain faithful to faith itself. God will always be with you. In Colossians, we are told that in and through the faith of Jesus, we've been reconciled with God. Jesus showed us the way in which faith can be concrete and whole, by which love makes possible creation and the beauty of the world. Let me give you a simple case in point. I was visiting someone the other day who wasn't very well in hospital, and they had a lot of reasons why they're very frustrated. But this person always had a joke, always had something to laugh at. And I thought to myself, buddy, you've got nothing to laugh at. Not only is Alzheimer's taking you more and more and you're so confused, but also your body is failing you. And when we talked, it was interesting what came out of you. I'm in a good place. Yes, it's not home. It's not what I really want. But I have to deal with what I have. And I've got lots of friends who drop by, people who show they care. And here's the point. Where there is faith, there is love. And where there is love, there is the promise of things to get better over time. Prayer is based on that underlying assumption that as Jesus practiced his faith, even though he had no reason to even keep his faith while he was dying, he triumphed over the grave, so we're told. Because he never lost sight of the source of his love. He never lost sight of what was possible whenever you believe, whenever you hold it to be true and sound. And my last point. When you pray, don't worry about how you pray. Don't worry about the words. Don't worry about their order or their eloquence. Just pray. Now I know that when you pray, you sound like a child going to Santa Claus. I would like, I want, I need. I know that. I do it too. And God isn't Santa Claus. I'm not going to get everything I want. I'm not going to get everything I need. I know that. But at least I can come to the source of all of my love and say, I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I'm bitter. I'm happy. I'm joyous. Thank you. Thank you. And what I have found is as you persist, as you knock on the door, it will open. And the answers will come, partly because what I say I leave in God's hands. But the other part of it is I take the responsibility of owning my own answer. It's not just for God to provide. It's for God to give me the wisdom to know how I can be provided with the support I need. I don't need a miracle to save me. I don't need some breaking of the rules and laws of physics to support my view that there's a God. All I need is God to open my eyes, my mind, my heart, so that I can know what it is that I need to do. And it's in that conversation where I talk to God that the door is open. The knock is made. And I'm heard. And invariably, after that difficult exercise, as I go out trying my best, there's an answer. And not always the answer that I want. But it is an answer. And the answer is, you're not alone. For you are my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Amen.